Welcome back to another episode of the Shaken and Stirred Show. I'm Nigel Barker in Woodstock, and we have a rather fantastic guest once again on the Shaken and Stirred Show. Good friend of mine. Our guest this week is no stranger to the Shaken and Stirred Show. He's actually an award-winning independent filmmaker and television director, and now author with his novel 99 Miles from LA. A fantastic guest once again on the Shaken and Stirred Show. Good friend of mine. Our guest this week is no stranger to the Shaken and Stirred Show. He's actually an award-winning independent filmmaker and television director, and now author with his novel 99 Miles from LA. Yes, you've heard the song. Please welcome back my good friend P. David Ebersole. David, how are you, buddy?
I am very good. I'm very good. Our lives are a little chaotic at the moment, so
seriously chaotic. I mean, how much have you got going on? This book, 99 Miles to LA. I've got an album with your
right.
I've got CDs. I've got all kinds of stuff. So essentially, there's a lot to talk about because I don't want to start, but you just said you're really busy. But before we get to how busy you are, I hope you've got a cocktail.
Well, of course. I'm talking to Nigel Barker. I have to have my cocktail with me, right?
It looks very fancy. You have a nice orange in yours. Meanwhile, I have an orange glass. What is your cocktail? What are you drinking?
It's just, I like silver tequila on the rocks with an orange squeeze.
So why orange? Most people go with lime.
I know. I like how it kind of changes the flavor. It makes it a little sweet without it being like a sweet mixer, and less carbs.
Less carbs than lime?
Well, no, less carbs than like putting some kind of a mixer into it.
True, that is true. And in fact, there are a lot of people. So I was asking because there's actually a movement in tequila of people who suggest orange over lime. So it's a whole thing, and in large part, if you think about it, the margarita, which is the most popular tequila-based cocktail in the US, is triple sec, which is orange liqueur.
It's orange-based. You're right. Yeah, that's right.
And so it's a natural that it goes really well with tequila. So if you're trying to have a skinny margarita, the true skinniest of skinny when it comes to a margarita would be, in fact, to do a squeeze of orange and not do the triple sec, which is full of calories.
Sec, right, exactly.
Straight in there. Only thing you're missing is lime juice. So if you add your own lime juice, you're pretty much skinny margarita all the way, by the way.
See, there you go. I'm losing weight as I'm drinking.
As you're drinking, which is the only way to drink anyway. And I thought I would sort of join you. I did something a little different. I like to help, sort of mirror something my guests are drinking, but I can't do another straight tequila on the rocks. There's not much to really do with that. So what I did and I've cheated because I couldn't find a copper glass. I did a tequila mule, which is a take on the Moscow mule, but we call it a Mexican mule. But, as Moscow is so out of fashion these days, I thought I would go with a Mexican mule, which is, essentially a vodka buck, but with tequila. So a buck drink is any drink that has lime juice and ginger beer with a liqueur of sorts. And that's the traditional. That's what the Moscow Mule was based on in the 1920s when it was first created in Hollywood, and all the stars were drinking it in a copper cup. And actually, there's nothing to the copper cup other than the fact it looks cool. It was a marketing gimmick done by Hollywood in the 20s that became famous. It is nice and cool. It does take on the icy effect of the drink. But other than that, there's nothing to it. So if you want to make yourself a Moscow Mule in a glass, go ahead. But this is tequila, ginger beer.
You've learned a lot about drinking from doing this show, I think.
Way too much. I'm like a ridiculous encyclopedia of stories of drink.
Right? I just remember you being kind of like a Sancerre kind of fellow when we knew each other.
Back in the day. And by the way, what do you mean you remember me being a Sancerre? God, that's so vanilla. I love it.
Well, I was Sauvignon Blanc, and you were like, oh no, the French is better than the Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, because I like the Marlborough Sauvignon Blancs. But
and now all my endorsers from New Zealand are going to leave me now after you said that. But we're off to a sailing start right here. Actually, I am fond of a Sancerre, but I have come around. In Vivo, which is a fantastic Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, is one of my go-tos.
That's my daily wine.
That's your daily wine. Yeah, for lunch.
Right, exactly. I had that before my tequila.
So look, let's jump into a couple of things. Before we get fully into your book, 99 Miles from LA, you are currently, right now, 99 miles from LA, right? You're in Palm Springs.
I live in Palm Springs. And so in the book, it's a crime fiction story. They commit their crime in Los Angeles, but they come to hide out in Palm Springs.
which is pretty much what you did, right? That's why you're there.
That's why we're here. Yes, it's autobiographical.
And you are now leaving to Mexico, which is only suggests that they've actually caught up with you finally, and you're literally going to try to go south of the border.
And not to give too much away about the story, but it is true that inside of the story, that's part of the plan, is the runaway to Mexico. And now suddenly we've bought a house, so I can start writing the sequel.
No, no, I'm aware of this. I'm sort of secretly reading between the lines here, David, and I know there's something is askew because this book, right? It's a fabulous book, by the way, super easy to read, and and it's a perfect holiday book. But you are a filmmaker, you are a documentary filmmaker, but you've also made other films as well, and you've done a lot of different things, as I mentioned. Television director, independent filmmaker. Are you planning on this book becoming a film? Is it was it written with that in mind?
So I actually purposefully did zero dialogue in the book. I don't know if you noticed when you're reading it, but it's all kind of embedded in thoughts, and what people like literature. And I thought, well, why don't I try to do something that's like that, like come up with some idea that's like a little bit different. So my feeling is that I hope that somebody buys it, goes and makes a terrible movie, and people come out saying, I actually really like the book a lot better than the I hope they miscast it, get a terrible director, rewrite it, make a happy ending.
That I doubt, but I think it's one of those stories. I took it with me to the Cayman Islands and had a fun read with it there, and it's a super easy read. And I want to get into the book a little bit more, but right now let's talk about the title and everything. 99 Miles from LA. It's a pretty well known song. A lot of people have done a version of it. You kind of get into it in the beginning of the book too. Did you? I mean, it's a kind of a phrase too. 99 miles from LA. What was your sort of incentive to name the book that? I mean, what was it from the song, or was it?
It all started from the song, which is that there's a singer named Donna Lauren, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but she's sort of she was in the Beach Blanket Bingo movies and a Dr. Pepper girl back in the day, great singer. And she took us to a Johnny Mathis concert for her birthday, and I had never heard that song before, so I literally taped it with my phone and kept it with me all that time. And there was something about it that was kind of haunting. What I like about it is that it's filled with hope, but you're almost sure that everything's not going to work out okay in the end. You're like, it sounds hopeful, like please be there, but you know that this relationship is doomed. And so that was sort of the beginning of the idea. And I do a lot of noir in my work. So the idea of dovetailing that in with a noirish kind of crime fiction, crime story made a lot of sense for me in this time when we have lost so much faith in our belief in the sort of American dream and the higher systems that are guiding us. When that happens, people begin to think, well, why am I the only person staying on the right side of the law? Everybody else is cheating. Everybody else is getting ahead through it. Why not me? And so then people are willing to kind of make that crossover onto the dark side. So between those two ideas, the characters began to get born.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you described the novel as a hard-boiled crime story with a bisexual love triangle peppered with double crosses. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's so you, by the way, just the way it's written. I mean, when I read that, I was just like, every word is juicy in there, and I love the way you write. And, you've added this bisexual element to it too, which makes it modern, makes it kind of new, and I think is something that isn't often covered in crime stories as well. Was that important to you to go there?
Well, it's funny. It was very natural to the characters. So what I wanted to do was have, yes, kind of a relatable love triangle story. And my main character, his name is Frank. He first meets this woman that he kind of falls for, gets involved with. She's the one with the big plan of how to steal all of her husband's money, but she needs partners. And so it turns out that the third partner is her bartender that she goes to regularly. Unfortunately, the two men, the minute that they meet, have sparks. And so that begins the sort of downward spiral, which is that he really had he potentially just sort of stayed with the one who brought him, then maybe it wouldn't have all gotten messed up. But what are we supposed to do? We fall in love.
Yeah, we definitely fall in love. I mean, and it has all those elements. Again, sort of this title, and I always want to go there because you mentioned it from the song, but there's a story behind the song, right? And the title as well. I mean, 99 miles from LA. Why did Palm Springs become such a big place for people to want to go to back in the day? I guess when was it in Hollywood? Was it the 40s? It was around the Frank Sinatra time, wasn't it? The Bing
Yeah,
Crosby time.
and even a little bit before that. But the studios had a rule that you couldn't stray further than 100 miles away from set when you were engaged on a film, because you had to be able to be called back. So this became, it's, you know, just within kind of the 100-mile radius of what they call the studio zone. And so people would come here to get away, but know that they could be called back. There was also, though, in their contracts, a morals clause that said that if you do this, if you do that, you can lose your contract, lose your stardom. So your Rock Hudsons and Marilyn Monroe wanting to have an affair with the president, where do they go? To Palm Springs, because even the gossip columnists would say, well, I'm going to take off that hat. Hedda Hopper would come here and say, you know what, we're here. It was sort of like a mini little Sin City where they could get away, do whatever they kind of wanted. It was out of the radar of the studios, but they were within the rules of saying that they still could get back.
So it's the original "What happens in Palm Springs stays in Palm Springs."
Exactly.
Was this pre-Vegas, do you think, or they stole that line?
You know, I don't. That is not a question I know the answer to. I mean, I know that Vegas sort of started with all of that, you know, Bugsy kind of time period. He started the Tropicana, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's when that whole world grew, and I'm guessing that's the 30s. I mean, I'm not a Vegas aficionado,
It
but
would be, yeah, be a seems like a similar time period, wouldn't it?
it's a similar idea. It's further away, so they wouldn't have been able to stay within the zone.
No, they would not be in the zone. But you know, it's such an interesting concept that with the whole with the zone. I mean, it wasn't even as if, because back then they didn't have the freeways that they do now, right? So it's not like it's like currently is like an hour and a bit. How far is it to drive from Palm Springs to LA
It
now?
ended up getting renamed the 2-hour law. You know, a couple of decades later, once there were good freeways, because, you know, from here to Silver Lake is 90 minutes, as long as you don't have traffic. Well, you always have traffic now, so it's always 3+ hours. But back in the day when they could get here in 2 hours, it was pretty close. But when the freeways were not so good, it was always 3-4 hours to get themselves out here. So that 2-hour rule is a more modern kind of concept that they came up with. But it was close. It was close enough to get to and close enough to get back to set.
Amazing. And what's Palm Springs like these days?
Well, you know, it's always been I think this is another reason I really like it for a noir, is that it's always been a bit of a false oasis. When you're inside of it, it's manicured, perfect, you know, and it harkens back to the days of the 1950s and the mid-century modern look of all of it, right? So you have that old American dream kind of all around you, and yet it's all as second houses in the middle of a desert, and you know, you step right outside of it and you're in some pretty dicey areas, which is why, you know, Desert Hot Springs plays a big part in the story as well,
Yeah.
because you feel that idea that as long as you're inside of this little perfect world, everything's fine. Step outside of it, and then, you know, there's people lurking around every corner. So it had a nice feeling for a noir. There's been a lot of Palm Springs noir lately. There's a book on Palm Springs noir, short stories, and there's been a lot of stuff done here lately.
It does have a Truman Show-esque vibe to it, in as much as it sort of feels completely. I mean, when you're there, like you said, manicured and perfect and all the rest of it, but you're in the middle of the desert too, and then there's some rough areas too. There's a sort of
and hard light and dark shadows, right?
Yeah, crazy hard light. I mean, fantastic light, like some of the most extraordinary light because of that hardcore, you know, desert light, and
yeah,
shadows are jet black.
But then the hard light is almost more kind of brutal than, like, say, if you're in LA and in the and out in the light of day, right? Like here, that's part of the brutal world, is the heat.
Yeah, well, you don't have the smog, so I guess that's one thing, right?
Right. That is true. That's true. We're beginning to get traffic.
Crazy.
We've gotten very popular. So
very popular. Well, hence you've sold your house and you're moving to Mexico.
Well, yes, that is true.
Yes, no. So, but why Mexico?
there's a place in Mexico called Merida. I don't know if you've been, but it's on the Yucatan. It's the capital of Yucatan. It's the second safest city in North America, and it's become a new kind of expat community. So a lot of people from the East Coast, us West Coasters don't know it as well because we go to Baja California, right? But on the East Coast, people use it as kind of a vacation area. But a couple of very good friends have been moving down there. The community is gay, and for us, we have two pit bull girls that we have to be able to take with us any place. So people who are talking about moving to Portugal, Spain, etc., we're like, well, we can't do that because we can't get the girls across the water. So we have to be landlocked. It has to be a place that we can actually drive to. So
your dog's going to play a part in the book too.
They do. They do. Well, the history of our dogs is how the book kind of starts, which is that the way that the two main characters meet is at the UCLA Sculpture Garden, and Shelley, the main female character, has taken her beloved pit bull there because she's on her last legs, and she wanted to take one more kind of romantic gesture, be outside with the dog, and kind of, you know, give her a moment. And that's when Frank happens upon her and helps her out, takes her to the vet, and helps her to euthanize the dog. So that scene is right out of mine and Todd's life, which is that we had our first pit bull, her name was Killer, and we had taken her to the vet and found out that she had to be put down, but we were like, we can't just do this in this cold room. Let's go up to the UCLA Sculpture Garden. And so I kind of just sort of, I use a lot of things from my own life. It's something that is a sort of form called autofiction, autobiographical fiction, which a lot of people have been doing over the years. It goes back to kind of Truman Capote a little bit before as well, but where you take things from real life and from your own life and then weave it into a story.
Yeah, no, actually, and I wanted to talk about your style and what inspires you. But you know, certainly with a, you know, you this is a new thing for you, this particular type of book, right? So, what was there something? What drove you to say, okay, I want to write a book now?
Well, as I say, I was an English major, so to me, it's the top form. Like to write a book, and you know, go into a bookstore and people go across, you know, E, and they go E, E, A, E, B. Oh, and they pull out, you know, your book from the alphabetized stacks. To me, that has always been the top dream for me to have accomplished that. And it's not like I've had a bad life. I mean, I ended up getting sidetracked into making films, and that became my career and what I've done. But that has always been still kind of haunting me as something that I wish that I had gotten done. So this thing came along called the pandemic, and we were all stuck at home, and we had finished our latest movie and kind of were looking for the next outlet. And it wasn't going to be another movie because you can't really interview people and go out into the public and create a film. So I said, well, why don't I do that book that I've been thinking about for so long? And 99 Miles from LA was the book. I mean, like, I've been making notes on it for 5-6 years. But it came out in a week. I mean, I'm sorry, in a month. It came out in a month. So
Wow.
once I sat down to write it, I went to Provincetown for a kind of writing retreat, and I had all these notes. It just out it came.
And what part did Todd play in the whole thing?
Well, he and I take walks together every day. And so normally we write together.
So sorry for everyone out there. Todd is David's partner.
Yeah, husband. And partner. I mean, like, you know, we do
partner in crime.
All of our creative work together. So it was strange actually to do something on your own. And I've had a little trouble not speaking in we when we are even talking about, you know, the book, because I'm so used to Todd and I are pitching our project and talking about
the last time you were on here, both of you were on.
Right? Yeah. And I asked Todd if he wants to be on, because, you know, he's on the record. So, you know, there's Todd, right? And I said, well, do you want to come on and talk about the record? And he was like, no, that has to be about you. Like, you know, it can't be, we can't muddy the waters. But but we, every morning we take dog walks and we work out story ideas. So it's like, I would be struggling with what's going to happen next, and how do I get the next characters to, you know, to get to that next plot point that I'm working on. And so I would just be talking out loud with him about it like we would normally do if we were going to go then and accomplish that together. But in this case, it was like, oh, okay, well, now I have to go back and do it by myself, you know, like, I didn't have anybody to help me.
Amazing. It's always interesting. When I'm looking at the book too, it's interesting because the chapters are short. You know, they're quick and short and sharp.
Yeah,
Was that intentional, or
it
did
is
you want it to
purposeful.
be like that?
Well, what I wanted to do, and I suppose maybe this comes from kind of my filmic training, but I wanted it to always pitch you forward. So I wanted you to know that it's like, and the idea of kind of almost creating cliffhangers, so that when you get to the end of a chapter, it's saying to you, "Oh, what's coming next?" But I'm also doing something that my publisher informed me is very difficult and very tricky, which is that I'm changing perspectives. So from my three main characters, and actually the fourth main character, which is the husband Manny, who they steal all the money from, I go into each character's perspective, and so when I change chapters, often I'm changing into the next person's uh, inner story, so that it's coming from that person now. So it gave me a lot of freedom to constantly come up with ways of approaching and moving the story forward. You're never stuck, because every time you kind of get to a place with a certain directive, the next character comes in and helps you sort of jump forward into the next things. The way I write in what I call tent poles. So, and I do this in film. We do it in our documentaries. We know certain things have to happen as you sort of lay out the story. You know, these characters need to meet. They need to get a third person to join them for the crime. The crime has to be committed. They have to go on the run. They have to end up in Palm Springs. Like, those are the things I know, but I don't know all the little stuff in between. I don't know, like, sort of how I'm going to get to any of those particular tent poles. And so the characters begin to talk to you. And as you keep those chapters short, when you keep the chapters short, you get to jump to that new perspective, and that character that comes in can help you kind of with a through line to the next story point. So it was both to help me, but I think also it keeps the reader moving, jumping and moving along with it.
No, I found it. Hence, I think it's a really good vacation read. I think it's a good read anyway, but it's certainly, you know, there's certain books I like to read at night to go to sleep.
Yeah,
Yours was not one of them. Yours was not that I didn't like reading it for that, but I didn't. I found myself taking it in the middle of the day to go read in the afternoon or in the morning, and it was like, some books I'm like, oh no, this will be the perfect book that I'll read a chapter and then I'll want to go to sleep. You
right.
know, and it's sort of like, this is great, and I'll calm down and all the rest of it. But yours was quite different, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you don't find out the name, Frank's name, until not in the first chapter. You don't mention his name.
Well, that might be true. His name is kind of tricky and kind of a reveal, because he's going by a pseudonym, and when he meets people, he introduces himself as Frank, and then it gets revealed as to what his real name is, and there's a bit of a story behind uh, his feelings about that. So I I hesitate to do spoilers, right? To tell people.
No, exactly, and I've been careful too.
But
I'm trying to dance around it because you guys have to go get it 99 miles from LA. But it is super interesting, how you write, and I guess you mentioned where you went to write. Is it important where you go to write? You went to Provincetown, and where else did you write, and why Provincetown? It's nowhere near where you live.
I think the most important thing is to get away from where you live. So to write is to isolate and get it done. And also, I write in rhythm, so I have to, even when I stop for a couple of days, I have to go back to the very beginning of the book, read myself all the way back up, do fixes as I go, get back in the feeling and the rhythm of the book to be able to go forward. So to go someplace where you have a concentrated amount of time means that you can keep doing that, and every day that you wake up, you're still in it, you're still in it, you're still in it. But when you're home, and then you've got a cocktail party, you got this to go to, and your sister calls, and whatever it might be, it's always kind of pulling you outside of that. So I tend to, when I write, go on a retreat. And Provincetown was just, it's a place we love to go to. It's a place that's kind of, at the edge of the world. So we felt like we'd get away for a minute, and it worked out really well. It was a great, we drove across country to get there. And as we were going, we were, in the car for hours and discussing kind of the ideas of what I thought I might write, and then listening to other books on tape and things like that. So that by the time I got there, like I said, I mean, day one, I was just kind of ready to go. When I writing is rewriting. So, once you get that first draft done, the next thing you have to do is sort of get into honing, making things better. So we did a second writing retreat up in Joshua Tree, which everyone thought was really strange because of how close to home it was.
I know, I was going to
It's
say.
in Palm Springs. What are you going up to Joshua Tree for for a writing retreat? But it's the same concept. We had to be alone and in a house and where no outside influences could kind of, dictate what was next and what we needed to do. And Todd at the same time was beginning a book that he's written that comes out this September 29th, about his favorite movie star Elizabeth Scott, who was a film noir queen. So they kind of have a touchstone together with the two books.
So, both the two of you, David and Todd, everyone helped me. They ghost wrote my book, Beauty Equation, the first book that I did. And it's funny, to your point, when I would give you notes and all my notes on it that you would then turn into actual something, I had to go and do that somewhere else. So I did that. I actually wrote pretty much all of it when I was in Sydney shooting America's Next Top Model.
Right, I remember that. Yeah,
in a hotel room, and I would just be in my room. And I, you're right. I don't think I would have got it done otherwise, because I would have been, just with my children and life and stuff. But being in a hotel room in another country, in another continent, in another time zone,
yeah.
that I could just be completely, fixated on what I was writing and be, not disturbed. And it was actually fantastic. So I see that completely. It's very interesting.
16 hours ahead of us, I remember. So we would, we'd have to try to kind of figure out when could we talk, where, we could, because one of the things in that process that was so great was that when we would write chapters, then you would read them back so that we would make sure it sounded like your voice, right? Because here we are writing something to you and for you, and and helping you to bring across your ideas. But then it's like, well, it can't sound like us. It still had to sound like you. And you read something and then go, oh, I wouldn't say that, or oh, that was, that. Well, we know you so well, so we were like able to kind of speak in Nigel,
which you did very well. But it's funny because I reading your book, I could hear you. So it's funny. It's sometimes you see something someone's done, but it's like it's different. But this was very much maybe because I know you too, but I felt you through the book, and I had a sense of you, which is fun, which is nice,
that I'm not an actor by any means, and so when the book on tape has been done, and it's beautiful. It's done by a friend of ours, Roy Samuelson, who has this great kind of beautiful delivery. And he starts out, and it's kind of like he enters it kind of slowly. And I thought, is he right? Like, is he on character? Is he on board with like the right way that this should feel? And then it's like, because he is really good, it would slowly get more emotional, and you got more wrapped into the story with him and through him. And it was very interesting, because I agree with you that to me it sounds like me and my voice. But when you then hear somebody else's voice do it, it was very interesting.
That is interesting. How did you pick him?
We know him well, and he's phenomenal at what he does. And I asked him if he would do it for us, and so he did it at cost. Like, he just said, they make me charge this much at Audible, and so I'll do it at that rate for you.
Interesting. What a strange world that is too. The sort of voiceover world. Was it important for you that the voice, the sound, you wanted him because you know him, but I mean,
yes, and his voice, I guess what happens by him reading it is that it becomes more Frank's book than my book, right? Because he feels more like that character. He feels like he's becoming that person. And the other thing is that Roy is openly gay, and I needed somebody who, it's like when they're having the male attraction, that it felt real and felt correct. And with Audible, I don't know if you know sort of how it works, but often what you do is that you just sort of go on and you get somebody assigned to you. You get a producer by signing on to Audible, and then they kind of give you some sounds, and you listen to some people and you put it together. But in this case, I was like, well, I'm already going to know what the quality of his voice is and what it will come out like. So it felt much safer.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not know the process. I don't think any of my books have actually become Audible books, but they're not really that kind of book, to be honest
It
with
would
you.
have to be you if it was like
I know.
we
I would
don't
have
want
to do
your
it
voice.
myself.
We'd be mad if it wasn't you.
That's a good point. Some fake Nigel Barker out there. Somebody putting on a good English accent, which meanwhile, people, my accent's fake as well. I'm actually from Detroit, but I don't tell anyone that. It would never have been a success on America's Next Top Model. You, a portion of the sales of each book goes to an animal shelter in Palm Springs. Is that correct?
It is. And the reason for it, the publisher asked me, like, is there any charity that you'd like to have a couple of dollars per sale go towards? And, you know, as I said, the book starts with.
That's after their take, though, right? That's not
Correct.
before the.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'm not looking at the books. but he asked me if there was anybody that I would like money to go to, and so we wanted to do something for kind of pit bull rescue. With we now have our fourth pit bull girl rescue, and they give so much to us that we just thought, well, is there a way that we can kind of give something back to them? And I called Palm Springs Animal Shelter where we got our last two dogs, and they said we could even, you know, do it officially, like we could actually have it be a part of the book and mention it inside of the book. So I'm happy about that. Yeah.
Amazing. Again, there's so many fun, beautiful things that you do, but you always manage to sort of keep it real, and I think that's such a nice thing. And I read that in the book. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. And I remember Butchie,
right? So Butchie passed away. God, now this house is called Butchie's Dream House. We name each house after the pit bull of the moment. And then Fido we've had her for 5 years, but she passed away when we were making the movie about Jane Mansfield.
right?
And so then during the pandemic, we knew that we were home long enough that, see, look.
I have the album right here as well, the Mansfield album.
Original soundtrack. It's on
Original
hot pink
soundtrack.
vinyl for Jane.
It's fantastic.
And we've always wanted a second dog, and we always thought that Fido could really use a sister. And so when we were home and knew that we could help train them together, we got Oopsie Daisy is her name. And she sat at my feet the whole time that I was writing the book, literally, like, you know, almost on my feet while I was writing. And she kept saying that she wanted to, you know, to be in the show. She was like Lucy. She wanted to get in the movie. She wanted to get in the show. So I was trying to figure out a way to do that. And I came up with this sort of idea of a second pit bull that comes into the story and offers some kind of hope. Turns out that it's a boy instead of a girl, because the main character flips. He wants to name her Daisy, flips it over, and the young Mexican boy who's selling it to him says "Oopsie Daisy," and the dog smiles and barks. So he goes, "Oh, okay, I guess that's the dog's name."
I know this is a book, not a film yet. But if there were a soundtrack, would it be just 99 Miles to LA, and if so, who would you have sing it, and what else would you have on it?
Well, there are great versions to the song, but the main character and his, main love interest, which is Ramon, really end up together, kind of having Johnny Mathis as their touch point. So I think probably a Johnny Mathis soundtrack overall would be fantastic. But people like Julio Iglesias, Dionne Warwick, Art Garfunkel, like so many people have done the song. So it would actually be really great that it was all different versions kind of creeping in different places. But I've told my agent, I don't want to do the movie. So, because the first question is, well, when are you writing the screenplay? And I was like, you can sell it if you want to, but just don't make me like try to do this thing of taking something that I wrote to be an actual thing. See, the thing about a screenplay is it's a blueprint. You don't you're not creating a real thing. You're creating a thing for everybody else to come together to make. When you write a book, a book is a book, and that's it. It's done. It's on a bookshelf, and there's an intimate relationship between you and the reader. They envision when they read it. They see what you've written. When you write a screenplay, now a director comes along, now an actor comes along, now a production designer comes along. It's what's great about movies is collaboration. But it's all of that coming together that creates the vision and creates the movie. So I purposefully just didn't want it to be that for myself because I've done it my whole career. That's what I have spent my time doing. And I'm
You mentioned that, and it's funny because I think there's this stigma attached to when books are turned into movies, always as if and how many times, almost 99% of the time, you always hear the book was better than the movie. The book was better than the movie.
right.
Is that something that authors fear, or is it because clearly you can get into more detail in a book, or what is that?
Well, there are rules in writing screenplay, and one of them is that you can only write what you can see. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, which is that a movie is up on a screen, and how can you write what's inside of somebody's head? I mean, obviously, great actors pull across internal moments and you can feel what they're thinking, but you can't, as a writer, say what they're thinking. And in a book, that's almost what your job is to talk about all the rest of it. You're talking about, why the color of a palm tree is important, or the history of the Palm Springs Valley suddenly comes in to be underneath what your character's motivations are. Well, unless you're going to do flashbacks and take people out of the story, you can't do that in a movie. So it's part of why I think people always say the book is better than the movie is that the tone of a book is to take you to all of those worlds. The point of a movie is to put something up on the screen and you have to be able to see it. It's dialogue and action. That's what you write. You never write internal thoughts. And in fact, you don't write really what people wear. I mean, you can if it directly pertains, but the idea that something is set in the 70s, well, now the wardrobe designer will come along and decide what Jennifer Lawrence should wear. So you're not dictating your whole world when you write a screenplay. When you write a book, you have to, because the only thing is going to be between you and your reader. So it's just a completely different form.
Wow, interesting. No, and it makes complete sense. But at the same time, it makes you realize too that clearly, if it depends on the caliber of your acting or the acting performances to whether they can actually bring all those nuances that perhaps I wonder. Do you know? I mean, do actors then, when they get the screenplay, do they then go and read the book too, or is that going to cause them problems, or should they know both? Or
I would imagine that they're all kind of different, that some people want to stay away from the source material because they're creating off of the page. And some people really want to know what brought this to the screen because it will help them to fill in the blanks. Because as I say, in a screenplay, there are a million blanks. I mean, there just have to be. So if you were a great actor and trying to fill in and try to figure out, well, what is all the way behind before she says that one line, if you go to the book, you might find out. So I would think it's sort of like the same thing as researching a real life character. If you want to play that person well, you want to know their history.
Now you've written one. Do you have a bug? Did you enjoy it? Was
I
it?
do. And again, without giving too much away, the end of the book, somebody does end up in Mexico. Once again, going back to sort of my strange autobiographical connections. But so I have this idea that now that I'm going there and I will be able to kind of do my own research about being an expat and living there and discovering that world, that I have an idea for a sequel called 24 Hours from Tulsa, which is also a song, where a love affair happens, but because of the crime that was committed in this book, the person can't get across the border to the person that they've fallen in love with that's in Tulsa.
I knew there was a sequel.
See, and then I have to try to think of like more songs with numbers and cities.
I know exactly. It's curious. I mean, it sounds. When you think of the song and then the rest of the book comes, or were you more about the storyline and then the title just was fit?
I mean, at least these two times, like the idea of the song is part of what helped me come up with with cobbling together a story. But you don't want to be. I mean, I think she's an extremely successful author and sells 8 billion books. Isn't it Sue Grafton, who like every mystery starts with a M is for this, or E, E is for that, or whatever it might be. Like for me, I might do it again, but I don't know that I would just keep doing it, have it be my thing. I think I'd have to kind of move off of it at some point. But I do have an idea, which is that I have left this person alone in Mexico, and there is a story that can continue from it. So I'm thinking maybe.
So we're talking music right now, but you sent me, and here I'm looking at your album cover, 21st Century Boys. It has you and Todd on it, and it has two other gentlemen on it. I played it a lot. I'm very familiar with. I mean, I was a big T-Rex fan, and so I would love 21st Century Boy. What? This is you. You're singing on this, right? This is
we
you.
are, yeah. So it's two lads from Liverpool, and the guy in the bottom corner next to Todd, he's
Right.
like our Pet Shop Boy. He's the genius, the musical genius, and the guy in the other corner is the fantastic singer. They're in a band together, and the way
What
the whole
are you two doing?
and we're singing also. We sing through the whole thing. We're Bananarama. Our voices blend.
Yeah, I was going to say Bananarama and Pet Shop Boys. I've never heard that as a mix.
Meets T-Rex. We call ourselves a pop punk boy band.
It's hilarious, except boy, look at him.
The other guys put the boy in the boy band.
Wishful thinking, my friend. Says the man who's bald on the cover. But yeah, and then the boy underneath you looks incredibly like he's sort of, I mean, it's a great cover too. What was the concept for the cover of this album? And I love it's on vinyl.
Joseph Caltese is a fantastic photographer. I don't know if you're familiar with his work at all, but he did Marilyn Manson's album cover, the famous one, Technical Animals, is that what it's called? And he's done Bjork, B-52s, he does everybody in the music industry. And he's one of my closest friends, and I've known him since I was an NYU student. And he's always kind of done portraits of me over the years. And so those two portraits of Todd and I are portraits that he had done of us. And we thought that they had just such a great feeling for an album cover. So he talked to a photographer in Liverpool and gave them all of the exact specifications, and kind of zoomed in to the session to photograph the other two boys exactly the same.
No, it's funny. It's funny you should say that, right? Because I am a photographer, as you guys all know, and I looked at this and I thought to myself, and I'll just tell you straight up, that the light's different.
Well.
So and I wondered why, and I looked at it and I'm like, it's similar, but not the same. Exactly. And so if you look at it and you can see, right, in your eyes, you have a wide light that goes across, and if you look at the cover yourself, you'll see it goes right across your eyeballs, and on the boys they have a round dot for a light bulb in their eyes.
Oh, you're right. A straight line versus a dot. You're
right, versus a dot, right? And if you look at the light on the side of their heads, the light wraps around on both of their faces, onto the side of their faces on both of them. And on you and Todd, it does not do that. It lights the top of your head, but not the side of your head, right? So it doesn't cover all the way around. In other words, the wrap is greater on theirs than yours. So it's not the same. It's similar, but not the same. And I picked up on it when I looked at it, and I thought to myself, that's unusual. Clearly it was not shot at the same day, and clearly not shot at the same time, or someone kicked the lights
actually
down.
By the same photographer. And
I did not know that part, but now it all makes sense.
Someone through it.
The mystery is now solved, and I said it to Chrissy, and she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Look," and she's like, "It looks the same to me."
Fascinating.
And I was like, no, it's not. It's like a crime. I'm like, look at the eyes and look at the story. There's a difference. There's a different light altogether. And then she's like, oh God. I'm like, she's like, you're looking at it too hard. Anyway, so there you go. So there's a secret. If you look carefully, people.
In the eyes, you can 100% see it. And it's like, it's the Americans versus the Brits, maybe.
It is the Americans versus the Brits. And this sort of the shirtless look too. I mean, it kind of has a prison vibe to it, because of you're stripped off, and yet it's sort of very refreshing and kind of like, I love the light blue. And then what's on the back? I mean, you've got a picture of a young lady who looks like this is a retro scene here. Maybe what is this meant to be, from the 60s or something?
So we licensed that photograph, and then put our album on top of her stack of records. Like she's listening to our record along with, as it turns out, Al Martino, Spanish Eyes is right underneath it. You know, we do a lot of work with Alison Martino, his daughter. And so we thought it was just a nice little tribute to Al. And I don't know, it kind of, the album ended up getting made in the Czech Republic because there's no vinyl anymore. You don't have it, like you can't get any vinyl in the United States. So we felt like it was kind of like a girl in the Czech Republic listening to records and listening to our record in her bedroom.
So you recorded it though clearly in the US, but did you record it with those guys from the UK, or did they record
They did
separately?
all their parts and all the music in the UK, and we did our vocals in at Palm Springs recording studio.
And how awkward is that to do that? Is it okay? Is it awkward? Is it weird?
Do you know what? No, it's funny because I think it's very rare now that people go into a studio together and do it all at the same time anyway. So you would
Yeah.
always be kind of doing your individual part, right? Even if maybe, you know, you're all hanging out together or something like that, and someone's in the green room and I'm in the studio singing my part. It's like nobody ever really actually comes into the room and performs everything all together.
It's such a strange thing. I know you're right, and I've known this for ages. I mean, we've had multiple performers and recording artists on the show, and who've done collaborations with Kanye West and so on and so forth. And I'm like, wow, it must have been amazing. They're like, well, actually, never met him.
Never met him, right? Exactly.
I'm like, what are you talking about? You have a hit single with Kanye.
People sometimes are up in arms about the idea of like, were Donna Summer and Barbara Streisand ever in the same room? You're like, well, does it matter? Like, their two voices are in the same room.
Well, it matters in your mind when you kind of fantasize about what happened. It's all a part of the fantasy, David, which I know you understand. But it's sort of, again, I'm curious. How did you meet them then? What was the process like if you hadn't met them? And I'm assuming you've met them at some point in the past.
Jay, who is our Pet Shop Boy, the musical genius, James Peter Moffat, but Jay he goes by. He is our musical genius. He's done the scores for the past 3 movies, and so he did the score for Mansfield. He did the score for the Trini Lopez movie, and he did the score for House of Cardan, our Pierre Cardin movie, and he and Mikey have actually then had a couple of songs on those different soundtracks, and we know his band. It's called White Rabbit Club, and they're kind of a indie band kicking around the UK together. And we were planning a movie. The way that this whole thing happened is that we were trying to put together a narrative film, and we had this idea about doing a star making thing like Idolmaker, where the lead guy who was going to be in the movie, we were also going to have him record an album, and then we were going to try to put that album out as part of kind of making this kid a star. And the money for the movie fell apart, but we had done all the work on the album. So we had all the tracks, all the music, everything all put together. Jay had done all the work, and Mikey had done all of the scratch tracks for for the guy to listen to, learn the parts and sing along, and then, make it his song. And so we were driving to LA one day when the whole thing fell apart. And I said to Todd, well, we kind of always wanted to do a record. Why don't we make it the Ebersole Hughes Company Singers, like the Enoch Light Singers or the Ray Charles Singers? And we'll all sing. We'll let Mikey do the heavy lifting on the high notes. And he's already kind of done all the scratch tracks, so he knows it. And we called Jay, and he was like, "That's a brilliant idea. Let's start trying to put it together that way." So the songs were all chosen by Todd for his character. It was a movie that Todd had written, that Todd was directing, that I was producing, and so Todd had already chosen all the material and how he wanted to kind of present this kid. And when the whole movie fell apart, we were like, "Well, why don't we do it instead?" And there's sort of a weird parallel to the book, which is that my main character is a frustrated wannabe pop star that ends up an adjunct professor in music at UCLA. So you're sort of like, well, I guess I kind of figured out how to make my own record as the ersatz main character of my book.
I love it. I mean, quite frankly, you've directed films, you've been in films, you've written a book, you've got an album. Whatever next?
I know, right? Like, what do we do? What's like the next thing we do to try to top our own selves? I don't know.
I mean, I don't either. I mean, it's like you feel like you've topped me at this point, which is not
You're such
shocking.
a hyphenate, right?
Not shocking, but I love it. I'm like, damn it, I want a record. Like, but
See,
I don't have a record. I need to speak to my manager.
Chrissy, I don't have a record.
Where's my record? She's gonna be like, you sound like
Those
a stuck
goddamn
record.
Ebersole Hughes boys, they've got a record. I want a record.
God damn it,
You
and
got
they're
a whole,
singing T-Rex as well, but I want to sing T-Rex.
you got a whole band. You got your kids. You got Chrissy. I'm sure everybody could,
I want to
hold
go
it
bang a gong.
up.
My goodness. Look, before we let you go, we have one more last thing called Last Orders on the Shaken and Stirred show, where we get into some rapid fire questions and just learn a little bit more about you. But 99 Miles from LA, everyone, comes out May, what date?
Well, actually, it comes out this week. Amazon has already started to ship because they get to do whatever they
So
want.
advanced sales right now, but our podcast comes out today is Thursday, everyone. If you're listening to this on the very first day, if not all this week, it's out. So it comes out potentially when?
Well, May 13th was the first street date, and
There
so
you go.
it's already been shipping though. Friends have been sending me pictures themselves, like with the book, so I know it's getting out there. But the nice thing about the world today is that you don't have to buy from Amazon, so you can buy from your own indie bookstore. We're published by a reputable publisher, so we're in every system. So if you were to go to the local bookstore in your town and ask for it, they can get it, order it, and have it.
Fantastic. 99 Miles from LA. P. David Ebersole. Last orders, mate. If you could drink, and you've got to have a good answer for this. If you could drink any cocktail from any movie or television show with a character from that show, who and what would it be?
Well, you sent me this question in advance, and I thought I'm going to stick with my film noir theme. So my favorite movie, my number one favorite movie of all time, is Gilda, starring Rita Hayworth. So I'd like to sit in that club with Rita Hayworth, with her singing. What the song is? You blame it on Mame. I just forgot the name of the song. In any case, to sit with Rita Hayworth while she's strumming her guitar and singing to me, and I'm sipping a martini.
There you go, a martini. What? She's
a vodka martini up with an olive.
Fantastic. Love that. Okay, I'll take that. Who would play you in the movie of your life?
Well, I would be Nigel Barker.
Okay.
He'd be a little more handsome than me, maybe have a little more charming than me, but
neither of those are true. I think I would have to probably train my accent, my voice, unless you want to sound like an Englishman, because I'm appalling at doing accents.
The person that I actually always think looks enough like me, even though he's much more handsome than I am, is Stanley Tucci.
Oh no, I don't think he's more handsome than you.
He's a stone cold fox.
He's half your size.
Well, I guess that's true.
But hey,
and he hasn't written a book, and I bet he doesn't have a boy band record.
He definitely, well, I don't know, he might do. Fantasy dinner party. You can invite 3 guests, dead or alive. Who would they be?
Well, there's a quote on the back of my book that's from Alison Martino, who is the friend that I was telling you about. And she says that the book makes her think of Joan Didion, but carrying Jim Thompson's gun in her purse while having a drink at a dive bar with Christopher Isherwood. So if I could have the 3 of those sitting with me in a dive bar, having a drink, I'd be pretty darn happy.
You'd be all set. Amazing. Go-to drinking song. And I got to imagine it's one of these on this album.
Wow, I don't know if I have a go-to drinking song. I'll stick with the theme and go with 99 Miles from LA. But the Johnny Mathis version, live.
Live. I was going to say Julio Iglesias because I just listened to it and I was like, it made me laugh. My mother used to play it and it reminded me of her so much when I listened to it. Final question. Shaken or stirred?
Shaken. Always.
There you go.
Stir?
If you're doing a martini, you stir. Unless you want ice in it.
The shaking. I like the shaking because I like the sound. and I like what it looks like in the bar when the guy is, shaking the martini.
You see,
Always
that
great.
has nothing to do with the flavor of the drink.
No, it has
You like
zero
the
to do
look
with
of
it,
it and the sound of it. Not, I'm talking about. I'm going to drink it. I don't want to care to look at the guy shaking my drink around, although it can be cool. But
the
guys,
aesthetics of the experience. You know what I mean? It's like
that's why we asked this question. Different strokes for different folks. David Ebersole. David, mate, thanks so much for coming on the Shaken and Stirred show and sharing 99 Miles from LA. You can get it right now, people. It's advanced copies, but it's out now. It's a fabulous read. I've had this advanced copy and I'm not giving it up. Go get yours. Can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you, sir. Always fun to chat.
Always fun to chat. Everybody, check us out on the Shaken and Stirred show on Instagram, and you can also check us out on YouTube. And we'll be back next week. Thanks so much, everybody. Cheers.
This podcast was produced and edited by Embassy Road.